Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to this meeting of the Environment and Climate Change Overview and Scrutiny Committee. As usual, this meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council's website and will also be available for viewing after the meeting. Can everyone please switch their microphone on when speaking and turn it off when they have finished speaking? Before we start, I confirm we have received apologies from Mrs. Page and Mrs. Seaton, and we are joined today by Mr. Coxon and Mr. Hills. Very warm welcome to you both, who are subbing on their behalf. I have also received apologies from the Cabinet Lead Member for the Environment, Mr. Payne, and Cabinet Lead Member for Properties, Mr. Bracken. Thank you. So the first item is election of Vice Chairman. I personally would like to nominate my colleague, Mr. Chapman. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, John. Thank you, Mr. Hills. Agreed? Thank you. Item number 2, the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of January 2025. I propose that the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of January are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Is everyone in agreement?
Yes.
Thank you. Item number 3, question time. I've received no questions from the public. Question number 4, asked by members under Standing Order number 7. I have received no questions from any members. Item number 5, urgent items. Presently, I have none. Number 6, declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda. Do any members have any interest that they wish to declare? None. Thank you. Item number 7, declarations of the party whip in accordance with the overview and scrutiny procedure rule 16. Do any members wish to declare the party whip? None. Thank you. I have not received any presentation of petitions under Standing Order 36. And that brings us on to our first substantial item, which is on pages 11 to 16 in your packs. And it's in relation to carbon emissions in our very own county council buildings. I'd like to offer a warm welcome to Hannah Moss. Thanks for joining us, Hannah. Energy and Decarbonisation Manager, who will present the report, and she's joined by Steve Grant. A very good afternoon to you as well, Steve. Head of Operational Property and Facilities Management. So it's over to you, Hannah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. As you'll have read in the report summarises the progress we have made to date on reducing carbon emissions from LCC's buildings and looks forward at some of the projects we have planned for 2025-2026. This committee will be well aware of the commitments LCC has made towards net zero and the strong history it has on reducing carbon emissions across its estate. So whilst carbon emissions from buildings remains a significant percentage of LCC's carbon footprint at 36%, in 2023-24, a significantly large reduction from all council. In 2023-24, we saw the largest reduction of emissions from council buildings at 11.7%. This was following the completion of a £3.6 million funded public sector decarbonisation scheme project. This scheme looked to extend the biomass heat network at County Hall to the Anstey Frith building. It also included the installation of air source heat pumps to the cabins at Bow Manor, removing all solid fuel from Bow Manor Hall, and also included the installation of solar PV panels across our estate. We were also successful in securing just over £190,000 worth of low carbon skills funding to develop a heat decarbonisation plan for the gas heated properties across our estate. This plan was completed in March 2024. The heat decarbonisation plan outlines how we can reduce carbon emissions from all our gas heated properties with a strong focus on fabric improvements and installing air source heat pumps. As you have seen in the report, the financial cost of installing these measures is quite significant and doesn't make financial sense on its own without securing external funding. This is why we have been applying for as much external funding as we can. To build on the outcome of the heat decarbonisation plan, we submitted an application to phase 5 of the Low Carbon Skills Fund in April 2024. Unfortunately, this application was unsuccessful, but feedback from the funders did confirm that our application would have met the minimum quality threshold. It was just there was not enough funding to go round, and so unfortunately we were unsuccessful. We have more recently applied for phase 4 of the public sector decarbonisation scheme. This application was for 115,000 towards the cost of installing air source heat pumps and solar PV at 4 family hub buildings across Leicestershire. This project will save approximately 14 tonnes of carbon per year, and we expect a funding decision to be made in May this year. Looking forward to 2024-25, we are going to explore the feasibility and viability of rolling out more rooftop solar across our estate. We also want to carry out more site visits to our electrically heated properties to look at ways to save energy and carbon. We will engage further with National Grid to identify areas for air source heat pumps and understand the grid constraints across Leicestershire. And we'll be revisiting the business case for a solar carport at Snibston Country Park. Finally, we are also going to look at the options for carbon offsetting, as for some of our smaller properties, this might make more financial sense than doing some of the fabric improvements. Funding has been allocated through the medium-term financial strategy for projects arising from the heat decarbonisation plan, and the energy team will continue to maximise all external funding sources possible.
Thank you, Hannah. It was a nice and succinct report. Just before I go on to invite questions from the panel and the members, can you just look at paragraph 23, solar carport? That sounds quite exciting. I'm going to be disappointed. Is it a carport with a solar roof, or does it actually do anything for EV vehicles?
We already, is that on?
It is, I'm on as well.
We already have EV charging points at Snibston Discovery Park. No, it's not called that anymore, is it? Snibston Country Park. And the solar carport is exactly what you think it is. It's going to be a canopy with solar panels on the top, and this will feed in to reduce the electricity demand at the site. So it would offset any electricity being used by the EV chargers, but also the rest of the electricity demand across the site.
Excellent, that moves in the right direction. Can I invite questions from, firstly, Mr. Bolter? You didn't disappoint, Mr. Bolter, thank you.
Last meeting, Chair, will I let you down? Of course not. Interesting, but as the County Council reduces the number of buildings it's got, it's not surprising that the carbon footprint's gone down. What I really want to know is what's happened to the existing buildings. So take the ones out of the equation that we've already got rid of. Still got a number of buildings left, so I want to see that going down. To take the buildings out we've already sold on or moved out of doesn't really give me any information, because that's bound to have gone down. So, you know, I know you can't possibly do it here, but the number of buildings we've got, I expect to see those figures going down over the years by different measures you put in. So I'd like to know how we're doing with that. Perhaps Steve might be able to answer that one rather than you.
Yeah, that's a good question. The cost per the energy per metre squared, I think if you look at the figures quoted, have gone down per metre. What we do at County Hall, obviously, we're letting surplus space, so the figures include our tenanted areas. So again, LCC occupied areas have reduced, and there's probably about 25% of the floor area at County Hall is now occupied by tenants. So I think, yes, I suppose we could get the information moving forward. We can part that out and present that differently. So it's a good point. But obviously looking at the cost per metre, is if the estate reduces, it's still the cost or the energy kilowatts per metre is still the same measure. So you are comparing like we like, but obviously the whole estate has reduced.
Are you happy with that response, Mr. Bolter? Mr. Harrison, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, it is a very interesting report. It opens your mind up to potentially what is happening, but I'm curious about what sort of cost are we putting in, because there's a cost through staff. Do we know what that bill is against featuring what the grants are. So we're not just doing this with grant money. We've got a team of people who are doing this, I presume, across the whole estate. How do we configure what it's costing us to then look at the analysis and say, this is the gain? Because to me, then I really understand it well, then that would be something helpful.
We have a very small but very efficient team within the energy team. There are only 2 officers, one of us, so less than 2 full-time equivalents. So the staffing resource is very low. But I think we have a very high output and what we're able to deliver. So I think the resource to kind of output ratio is significant.
Right.
Mr. Grant, thank you.
Yeah, just to add on that, I think it's embedded across our team. So any refurbishment or condition improvements of the estate, the current team that are surveyors and project managers have checklists that Hannah's team have developed around low carbon checklists. So if we're building a new school or if we're refurbishing an area, it could be a corporate building, we have a checklist that the project managers follow. So it's embedded sort of in our day-to-day BAU operations. So staff are already there doing the maintenance, doing renewals, but they're embedding those opportunities as part of projects going forward.
Could I just ask, Mr. Chairman, is there an overall efficiency benefit? So do we know what on the scale of benefit and what those costs are attached so we can really understand it? Because what it is, you've got a team there, there's other people doing whatever, so it's not just 4, there's obviously other people involved. Trying to understand, how do we mark the efficiency? It's something we've undertaken with determination. It was an agreed policy, which is good, but I'm just trying to sit back and say, well, hang on, are we getting the cash benefits as a result? So, we're paying the money. Are we seeing some benefit for it? That's all. It's not clever. It's just trying to understand it.
See, we make financial savings on our energy bills when we implement these projects, and we can go away and do some analysis that I can assure you that the energy cost savings are far outweighing the staffing costs to deliver them.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. And I do apologise. Can I come back to you because you did wish to make comment? Is that in response to what Mr. Bolter or Mr. Harrison?
It was just, thank you, Chair. It was just on the back of the end of Mr. Bolter's comments there. If there's a significant change in a building we do and it equates to more than a 5% change, we will re-baseline, so then we understand the impact then. So that's then captured. As you say, we've got rid of some assets in terms of the overall council estate, but then we re-baseline for that estate that we do have. So that happens, and we do bring to this report the greenhouse gas, to this committee, the greenhouse gas emissions report, and that's where all that information is captured. So it was just Mr. Bolter's point.
Thank you. Just before I move on to Mr. Hill, so Mr. Harrison, I think for clarity, are we just trying to see what the return on investment is and how it's outweighed? Is that correct, sir? Yeah, I agree. That would be useful.
So, do we take into account the 24% that we've now let out? Do we still accept that? Is that our responsibility? Is that whoever is the people sort of using those buildings, the tenants? How do we distinguish that saving? Because it's a decent chunk, nearly 25% of the whole estate here at County Hall. Thank you.
Joanna.
Not to speak for my property colleagues who will kick me under the table if I'm straying into areas that are outside of E&T's department. I just for members' benefit, I think we're probably considering quite a number of different financial or efficiency considerations. I think it's maybe just worth putting into the debate. My understanding is the property team, really small team, they have either through bidding or other means brought in, the best way I can describe it is millions of pounds of capital investment into the council. And additionally, so that's external money that we haven't had to find on the bottom line. They also, with that very small resource, apart from bedding into their general processes for wider staff, are making savings on our annual energy bill, so a different financial saving to the council, which will be found in our bottom line in various parts of the MTFS. I think they're slightly different things to, for example, what is the cost per tonne of carbon that the council is or isn't achieving. That's a different financial question, and we do tend to cover those questions in the annual environmental performance reports and the greenhouse gas report that say we've reduced our emissions by 74%, and that is a cost per tonne of carbon of X. So again, that is less about necessarily being a saving. There is a recognition that I think to invest in carbon offsetting or avoiding our carbon is a cost to the council, but we're tending to find the means to deliver that from capital investment or energy saving. So net, up to now, we've had some really substantial gains overall. I think there is a recognition that, again, a separate issue also is how are we in a separate setting rationalising our estate, making it smaller. So Councillor Bolter's point, then you re-baseline and you go, right, with a smaller cohort of buildings, what is our cost per tonne of carbon, how much have we invested? But they're different financial variables that across different MTFS or the annual performance report or the greenhouse gas report, we give you those metrics, but they're slightly different questions posed. I've just put back through you, Chair.
That's fine. I'm very conscious I've got Mr. Hills waiting. Can I just ask a question just for simplicity, please, Hannah? We talked about the fact that we've now, could I be as bold as to say, leasing 25% of our property. The reductions that I see in your report are very favourable. Does that include our 25% tenants, or are we talking about the reductions in the 75% that we've retained? Is that a global figure across us and our tenants, or is that reduction just about us excluding our tenants? And are our tenants invited to be involved in our aims for carbon reduction? Sorry, Mr. Hills.
So included in those figures are all the properties that we pay the energy bills for. And so that will be our corporate properties. It won't include properties that are leased out to tenants, because then tenants are responsible for their own energy bills. The exception to that is obviously places like County Hall, where we have multiple uses of the building. And so in that case, we include the tenant's usage in our figures.
So are there any caveats that before we actually sign our tenants in, that they adhere to our global objectives, or can they come in and basically leave the heater on all night if they want to? Sorry to sound so blunt instrument. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, we have tenant liaison meetings. Obviously, this report refers to the previous year, so obviously 25% is probably where we are heading now this year. At tenant liaison meetings, we have environment champions that attend, and our tenants have their own environment champions. So that is sort of an agenda item that's discussed. Everything from food waste to initiatives at the building and how they can help with recycling and saving energy.
So effectively, they toe the party line.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it should just be added that obviously at places like County Hall, the tenants don't have access to control the heating and things. That is all controlled centrally. So we are still in control of that.
Thank you, Hannah. Apologies again, Mr. Hills. Thank you.
No need to apologise. My question sort of followed on from Councillor Harrison's as well, actually, about the funding of these projects. But it's not particularly on the efficiency of the team or anything like that. It's more the bigger picture of what we're doing here. I think obviously there are not just financial gains. The reason we're doing this is for climate change reasons. It's not necessarily to save the council money in the long run. But at the end of the day, we've got to pay for everything. And as a substitute onto this committee, I sit on the Health Committee, the Children and Families Committee, and we've got to make some real financial difficult decisions. And then we look at table 14 that says actually it's going to cost us, for Fabricone, it's going to cost us 4.4 million to implement this. And we're going to make a saving of about 200,000 a year on the energy bill. And what you're saying is a lot of the stuff that we do gets grant funded from the government. I was wondering if you could put into perspective what's actually the budget for the county council and what is the budget that we're doing in grants. So just very rough figures. Are we totally reliant on the government? Because who knows what's going to happen nationally? We've seen that even the government's having to make difficult financial decisions. So if they suddenly pull the plug on a lot of the grant grants that we get, are we up the creek without a paddle then?
I believe in the MTFS, there's approximately £100,000 per year over the next 4 years for decarbonisation projects. So you can compare that to the level of funding that we are getting externally as well.
Just ballpark what the external funding that we got last year was.
Last year, so for the heat decarbonisation scheme, for the heat decarbonisation plan, that was 191,000. The application we currently have in is for 115,000, and then the one we received, it was probably back in 2020, 2021, but the project was completed by 2023, 24, was for 3.6 million.
I know we've extended the time frame which we want to achieve net zero by, but if we're talking about sort of millions from the government and us only putting in a couple of 100,000, then we're heavily reliant on external source to meet that target, aren't we?
Yes, we are. I would say though that if there is a clear investor save opportunity, this council is very forthcoming with finding the fundings. So if we can demonstrate a quick payback in a project, then projects do get delivered.
Are you happy with that, Mr. Hills? Just before we move on to Mr. Hunt, Hannah, bit disappointed about the Salix, or the Salix. Just missed the boat there, didn't we? So it sounds like our bid was very, very robust and good. Do you think we'll get another shout at that?
I hope so. Rather than allocating funding on a first come first serve basis for this funding round, Salix decided to randomly allocate each application a number, and then they assessed applications in that pipeline order. So unfortunately, we just got allocated a number that was too high, and by the time they got round to our application, all the funding had been taken up. So, but it was pleasing to hear that our application would have met the minimum quality threshold, which shows evidence of the hard work of the team. And the government has been regularly announcing these different phases of low carbon skills funding and public sector decarbonisation scheme funding. So we hope there'll be more in the future that we can take advantage of.
So it's not what it is, it's where you sit on the number trail.
For that round of funding, it was, yes.
I wonder who came up with that theory. Mr. Hunt, thank you.
Easily read report, and that tells me at any rate that it's an extremely well managed project right the way through. So, congratulations on that. The discussion around this table has been about, does it wash its face, basically? And putting it crudely, are there other things that we could do with £100,000 or whatever that would be more rewarding for you guys and for us on the resident side, if you like? Other things that we could be doing which would be more effective in reaching the aims that we're looking at, which is carbon saving, but also through the grant system demonstrating the feasibility of various other options. That would be my first question. The other one was there was, I think still is, a solar something project whereby we worked with providers of solar. This isn't particularly concerning your report actually, but it was a project which worked with a provider of solar paneling. It's called Solar Together. If that's blank.
I'm just going to wait and allow.
Touch on that. So that's the sort of thing that we might be looking at instead of doing this rather more experimental work. Thank you.
I've got an immediate response from Steve. Thank you, Steve.
I think obviously we're responsible for the corporate estate, so whether externally funded or internally funded, the investment has to pay back. So that's part of the quality criteria that Hannah mentioned. When we are applying for external funding, has to pay back within, is it 5 years or a short period of time? So the benefits are we get incentives from solar and from biomass. The carbon, obviously, reduction. It's the opportunities. We've got the central maintenance fund, which is just over 3 million a year. And there's opportunities that when we're renewing, updating light fittings, things like that, we're changing those for LEDs. So on a day-to-day basis, although they might not be energy projects as such, it's sort of embedded in our business as usual. So as we're improving, replacing windows, we're looking at U values. So yes, it's not standing out as a particular project, but it's happening on a daily basis across our department as we maintain the buildings moving forward and looking after the estate. And any buildings or anything that is probably doesn't pay back, then that's been considered by the estates team, for potential disposal or replacement. So,
Mr. Hunt.
I've sort of gone off on a tangent here, but the scheme is called Solar Together Leicestershire, and the first line on the website says Solar Together Leicestershire makes buying solar panels and battery storage easy. I look at this and I'm thinking maybe we should be doing more of that.
Joanna?
Just through you, Chair, just to differentiate, I know we've got colleagues from property, it's just to make the point that firstly, Solar Together, absolutely, but it's a scheme for residents. So Solar Together is around making an offer to Leicestershire residents or whoever else is involved in it so that they can potentially apply for, get some sort of support and or funding and an assessment to have a solar array on their residential property. The only reason I add that or interject is because obviously Hannah and Steve are here with the report that's just to differentiate. Councillor Hunt is absolutely right. It does exist and it's a scheme that is potentially available or has been. The report obviously is looking at what we do with the £100,000 a year that the council puts in towards its own carbon commitments. So that I think we all know on this committee that the major sources of carbon for the council in terms of its own net zero targets are coming from transport, buildings and street lighting. So the big chunk where Hannah and her very small team look to tackle that. And it's what we do with our own council money, that £100,000, whether we use it as seed money to try and secure extra additional grant money so that we can have exponentially more. And just to really support that team, I think it also just shows that it recognises that since we started recording our performance and Councillor Hill mentioned it, back in 2008, it is probably a fair reflection to say we've done all of the opportunities that are saving the council money, spend a bit, save a lot. Before you even look at grant money, do the solar PVs, bring down your energy, put the biomass boiler in and transition the use of fuel for County Hall. We've done those big investments where there is, as well as an environmental benefit, a financial one as well. So what we're left with is absolutely these tables that recognise that eventually where you're getting to is your cost per tonne of carbon is really significant. And that is a challenge not just for the county council, but for all councils. Once you've achieved those big wins, it becomes increasingly difficult. And it's something that my team, alongside property, we talk about carbon offsetting. At some point, we will have to, not necessarily yet, but we will be in the game of going, right, what would we need to do to find a means to do forms of planting, have a means by which we can generate carbon offset schemes so that we still achieve some of these targets, but not to go to that place and space until we've looked at all the other opportunities that are there.
Thank you, Joanna. It's a succinct and robust and straightforward report. Thank you, Hannah. I'm not sure we've got any more. We have from Mr. Bolter. Mr. Bolter.
Yes, all these solar panels, fine. What is the lifespan of the solar panel? What plan have you got to replace them when they start going down in efficiency? I think 5 years is and start declining efficiency. So in 10 years' time, you're going to be back to square one, or you've got to replace them, or some of the new technology will come on board. There's got to be some.
Yeah,
some plan somewhere.
Yeah, their efficiency does slowly decline year on year, but it's very small. It's probably less than 1% every year. It slowly declines. The lifespan of a solar panel is roughly about 20 years, although that is expanding as technology advances. Other parts of the arrays, such as inverters, might need replacing every 7 to 10 years. We take out extended warranties for those parts to ensure that we have replacement planning in place for those parts that are likely to go within the life cycle of the solar panels.
Thank you, Mr. Bolter. Hannah, it's quite a celebratory report, actually. It's positive. My only concern, I suppose, would be to echo many of the voices in this room. Have we harvested the low-lying fruit? And are we now dangerously edging towards diminishing returns because it's going to get harder and our budgets are going to get more restricted? It's a big question to ask. I don't expect you to come back with a succinct and thorough answer on that, but are we sort of dangerously going into the law of diminishing returns, which means the more easy stuff we've done, the harder we drill, the more granite we're going to find?
Yes, we have definitely done a lot of the low risk, high reward projects so far, like say the low hanging fruit. I think it is more difficult and it's getting more costly to save carbon. There are probably still things out there. We are still always, looking for opportunities, but our task is getting tougher. And as Joe said, there's those conversations then about carbon offsetting later down the line of, for some properties, it might not be a viable option to get it to net zero. It might be better to offset.
Any further questions from members? I'm just interested in one thing, a point that Mr. Hunt raised, and I'm aware that I might be leading us up a dark path here, but it's just a quick question. Mr. Hunt spoke about, was it Solar Together, Mr. Hunt? Is that what you call it? One could only assume that organisation is in dialogues with developers and other people, or they're not working in silo. Are we actually talking to them, and are we talking to developers about, obviously, the new builds that we're putting up everywhere? Are they embedded in those dialogues, the Solar Together initiatives? And you might be better to answer that. Sorry if I'm taking you down a dark track, but I would have thought it was reasonably obvious if such a worthwhile project, if that existed, that they would be sort of baked into agreements with developers, possibly.
I guess it's horses for courses and markets, isn't it? My understanding, and Joe's probably get more details. Solar Together, yes, is a private organisation. It works with residents. And residents actually have to fund the whole cost of it. But they get the surveys, they get the advice, etc. Our role as local authorities is to advertise and promote that, because it's a route, for residents to be able to, become solar, etc., and get the advantage of that. I can't answer as to whether they're talking to developers to sell their products to developers. At the moment, where we interface with them is them actually interfacing with our residents to assist them in transitioning to solar. We can't, it's through the planning process as well, that developers will be considering solar. And I don't know about you, just out of interest, there's developments near me. And it's interesting that every second or third house has got solar, but not everyone. So it cannot be a base requirement of that particular planning consent. However, a developer, for whatever reason, is seeing the market there, and it's worthwhile putting that there, because they must feel there's a buyer's market then for going for that kind of product already built into your house. The real way to make progress is to put that as part of the regulation through the planning process, but that's completely out with anything to do with Solar Together.
As a local authority and policy, we create policy. Can we not? Sorry, again, I'm just interested. It is my last hit on this. I know. Do we have any influence or over localised planning to not insist but request that is caveated into the agreements? Otherwise, I mean, what led? How do we? I mean, I would have thought that new properties would have to be super biocarbon efficient, all sorts. So what you're saying is really up to the developers to decide whether they want to put solar panels on the roof or not. but we have no influence and we can't influence that. Sorry, Anne, it's an interesting area.
As a county council, we're not the local planning authority, with the exception of minerals and waste, obviously. Any other planning consent, new developments, residential, commercial, is down to the local planning authority, which for us in a two-tier area is the district authorities. So they will have to be cognisant with the national regs, which is led by National Planning Policy Framework. They have within their discretion an ability to add policies to their own local plan, but that will be down to the local planning authorities and their views of the market and how far they want to go in these things. So I can't really talk for that as an employee of the county council and the planning authority.
I didn't wish to be contentious. I just thought it would be judicious of them to consider every best available option to make sure there's a sustainable planet going forward as they're putting up new houses. Thank you, Hannah, and thank you, Steve, and thank you, Anne. No, one further comment from Mr. Bolter. Thank you.
Way around this, Chair, is for the central government to actually introduce planning regulations to make sure it's done for new developments. The building regs at the moment don't need it. The energy efficiency of building isn't sufficient. The national builders will build to the minimum amount of standards they can to get the price down, because they're interested in getting maximum amount of profit out of the build. So unless you alter the building regs, not from the basis, that's the way to get things moving. So the new building regs, higher energy efficiency, you can put in wastewater systems, grey water systems, you can put in solar panels, heat pumps, whatever you want, but do it through building regs, then everybody knows where they're starting from. It's a level playing field. At the minute, the builders just say, we can't afford to do that, so we won't do it. Simple.
And as supportive as our trusted officers at the council are, I don't think it's within your grasp to influence that change at this point yet, is it? Be nice, but fortunately not. Members, is there any further questions? Anything else? I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Steve and Hannah for joining us this afternoon. So thanks for coming in. Colleagues, that leads us on to pages 17 to 28 in your packs, which is Environmental and Performance and Progress Update Report. And again, it's over to you, Anne Carruthers, Director of Environment and Transport, who will report this for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is the 6-monthly performance report the committee is well used to, and I propose just running through the 16 of the 26 indicators that have been updated this time around. It takes us to December 2024, that's a reporting period, unless otherwise stated. Some indicators are updated annually, etc. It depends on the data set. So I'll take you through the ones that have changed. 6 have improved in performance, 1's declined, and 9 have stayed the same. If I start with the clean and green indicator, and it might be useful to, I always find it useful to look at the appendix, the dashboard. It's much easier, I think, to see it there. If I start with those indicators, both renewable electricity generated and renewable, if you can even see it, electricity capacity in the area, they both improved, but they're both in still the 3rd quartile when compared to other comparable authorities. The latter, the renewable capacity, improved by 27%, so that's a real positive. That's affected by factors such as government incentive schemes and the wider energy market. So those wider factors at play are obviously having a positive impact at the moment, which is really good to see. Moving on to domestic properties with energy performance certificate C+ for new homes, that stayed static relatively, and it sits in the 1st quartile, which is great. We've always got really good performance on that one. However, the percentage of domestic properties with energy certificate C+ for existing properties, that's improved slightly, but it's in the 2nd quartile. Just a reminder, that data comes from when houses are sold, properties are sold. So it's not data on the whole housing stock. It's as they change hands that we build up that picture. So just a bit of caveat in that data. We didn't see any change in the amount of renewable energy generated or as a percentage of consumption, but we do expect that to improve over the coming year due to improvements in the biomass boiler and solar panels under management. And you've just heard about that from Hannah. They've, increased the estate to cover Anstey Firth House, etc., that kind of thing. So we will expect to see an improvement in performance over the coming months on that. We've seen a reduction in PM 2.5 air pollution. That's a fine particulates, so that's positive, but still in the fourth quartile, so still a long way to go compared to comparators. There's been very little change in the County Council's greenhouse gas emissions, but we did see a reduction in the total business miles claimed, which is well within its target. So that's still going in the right way, which is good. We've seen a drop in the number of hectares of County Council land in better management for nature. It is meeting its targets though, and that's due to disposing of land that was in our ownership. I think it was 118 hectares that were sold, disposed of. The remaining indicators under clean and green, including percentage of suitable land in better management, tree planting, and all the waste related indicators, they haven't seen any significant change this time from previous reports. And the only other one I'll mention at the end is under the strong economy and infrastructure outcome, and that relates to NOx exceedances, and that's seen an improvement. It's gone from 3 to 1, so again, real positive movement there. Just a very quick summary for you, Chair, but happy to take questions, and Nicola is here to assist as needed.
No, thank you, Anne, for being succinct. Mr. Harrison, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paragraph 19, air quality. I'm just very interested to know how they came to the reduction. How did they measure it? What was the sort of method of methodology of measuring? Because obviously, the annual report that all districts should submit, and I know that's not always been quite right, so I don't know whether this is all altered now under this new regime and all districts put in one as one body. I've no idea how that operates now, but I am highly suspicious of, unless there's been a massive improvement, and I'd just like to know how and what do they use to analyse air quality. Is it across the whole of Leicestershire? Is that just one area is pretty bad, but some others have improved? We've just got these numbers here, and it can be quite misleading. So I'd be very interested in that. I'm also interested in the miles where we've gone down. Is that because staff are at work, at home rather? And has that had an effect now on that figure? But my key bit really is to understand how the partnership was able to arrive at that and what technology they used to be able to create those numbers, because that's really critical. Thank you.
Hello. So this data we get directly from DEFRA. So they report this for us on an annual basis. So hopefully that answers your question. It's not actually local in terms of...
No, that just confirms my thoughts, because it's fairly blind. I know one authority is 2 years behind submitting stuff, and I know unless they're measuring things correctly with proper equipment, it is a gamble. DEFRA used to show maps when I first got involved with air quality, how bad it was in a certain stretch of roadway that was looking at being extended and widened. And local authority were absolutely, the chap there just said, don't believe that, don't believe that. So there was, now they're all meeting together, which has always concerned me, Mr. Chairman, because we are the people supposed to make policies, and this is just all the officers getting together to create a policy forum with nobody else of another view or opinion ever allowed in to create policy. So that's always caused me concern. But I am quietly, not in a nasty way, a little dismissive, because if we're relying on them, basically what they're doing, they're marking their own homework. They're saying what it is. And I know that they've turned off measurement schemes when they're doing building works and all. It's unbelievable, I could tell you, but it won't do anything today. All I'm trying to understand is if it's DEFRA getting it, they rely on the district councils to submit their annual status report. And some of those don't submit it on time. And then I'd want to know how they evaluate it, what equipment are they using? We always see as a number and it looks lovely and everybody smiles and says great success, but is it really success? Because we're still having problems understood by the communities of over air quality. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Madam, I apologise. I don't know who you are. Sorry, I can't see your badge.
Sorry, I'm Nicola Truslove. I don't think I have one today.
Welcome to the committee. And thank you anyway, Nicola. Anne.
Just to add to what Nicola said there, yes, it is district council information that they have to submit to DEFRA, so it's on the basis of that. You'll know as well, however, the Director of Public Health here has the responsibility for air quality, and he works very much in tandem with the district authorities, and he did bring a report to this committee a couple of times, or it might be even last time, lose track, don't we, on that annual air quality report from the districts. Now, I can't sit and validate for each particular one. All I would say is they do have air quality professionals working for them. So, they will have to be, I'm assuming, applying and providing that data according to DEFRA requirements around that. But I certainly can't validate that, unfortunately, at this point in time.
Mr. Harrison, just before I come back to you for response, I like the term marking your own homework. I think that's applicable to lots of different things. But would there be, I would suggest, Mr. Harrison, that you're alluding to the fact that figures could be favourably manipulated for whatever narrative and cause. Would there be any value or capital in trying to do that?
Mainly because it stifles development. I was a member of an authority where they had a great reputation of building lots of homes. And it also conflicts then when you bring in heavy industry, probably logistics and all that sort of thing. So I do know, and I clearly remember the debate with the Director of Health. And, his skills are not really in science of air quality. And that was a good little debate we had, but I mean, it is where we are. I understand that, but I'm just raising concerns, Chairman, because there is an inequality in all of this, because air quality is so damaging to health, and we've got to be able to understand it properly, and it has to be measured in a proper way. And if they're not using the proper equipment, and the best is the Zephyrs, which actually can tell you everything. And it's it's so advanced that you can now key in as a member of the public if the authority wanted, and you can see where the Zephyr is and what the air quality outside your house and that road was. So that's broadening it. But if you're not so I'm just saying it's going to be so difficult, but something's got to happen eventually to be able to hold it and understand it, because at the moment there isn't just that facility to be able to judge it and justify it. If you're doing stuff and you're passing it on and people are making decisions about things, and because I've been so involved, I have a lot of knowledge about it, and it's not to sort of be arrogant, because I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to say, look, there are probably more questions here that we cannot answer. But it'd be remiss of me to sit here and just pretend, I'll vote for that, that's fine. I'm not damaging the report. I'm just saying I'm just very concerned how that's made up. And I think probably in the future as an organisation, we ought to want to be interested in how this comes about, because, it's in our name. And, we're not doing anything wrong, but it's in our name that we're sort of saying that's fine, but we don't know the origins of it and the standards.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I recall we did have just before I go back to Anne, I recall we had quite a robust conversation about the Zephyrs and the telemetry and things in a previous meeting, which might be worth resurrecting that and see how these two compare. Thank you, Anne.
Just to remember, Mr. Harrison had a second point to his question, the business miles one. So I was going to come back in that if it was all right. So I could have got away with that one, you've forgotten. Just to say, I mean, I think we're saying I don't have any real science behind this element, but you know, I think where we're seeing some savings in business mileage is because we are working in different ways now. Whereas before, for instance, officers would have gone out about the county for meetings and things. We're now having them electronically in Teams meetings, which I'm sure you do for many of your meetings, etc., etc. And I think that's why we're beginning to see some, or we're continuing to see some, you know, reductions in the post-COVID period, because we're providing the same services. However, we're doing it in a different way, and often that means there's less physical travel involved in it, and we're managing to, you know, provide those services in a different way that don't involve mileage and going out and about.
Mr. Harrison.
Thank you for that, and I totally agree. All I would say, it'd be lovely if there was a little note to say this is achieved, because, you know, it's nice to know that was so simple and easily. Yeah, it was wonderful. And you just glance and think, oh, that's okay. That's the benefit of whatever happening. Yeah, thank you.
Can I invite any further questions from any members or any further comments that wish to add? If you feel so, Mr. Bolter.
If we turn on to page 26, we're talking about amount of stuff going to landfill versus waste going to be incinerated.
Mr. Bolter, do you mean paragraph 26 or page 26? Paragraph 26,
yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Sorry,
Now-
Councillor Bolter, I was in a totally different place in that report. What was
Well,
your
I know,
question?
well, I know, it's one of those days, isn't it?
Mr. Bolter got us all on that one. Thank you.
Keep trying, don't I? So 5% to landfill, we want to try to reduce that because they've been taxed on that. So we're turning it now to energy from waste as much as we can. We're going to be taxed on that. So what's the tax difference between landfill and incineration?
Through you, Chair, the short answer is I can't answer that at the minute because we're not currently, there is no such thing yet as an incineration tax, as you put it. The emissions trading scheme isn't scheduled to commence for another 3 years, I think. So at the moment, the only taxation from the Treasury is landfill tax, but we are led to believe there will be an emissions trading scheme, which is not entirely the same as landfill tax, you know, cost per tonne. It's a slightly different thing. And we have talked about potentially bringing a report to this committee at some future point just to explain how that works, which is slightly different. But at the moment, we are only paying the landfill tax, so on landfill. And I think we've debated this at committee before. Fiscal measures aside, I would still be advocating from an environmental perspective that the County Council moves its waste out of landfill, which is arguably the lowest environmental means by which we treat waste, because there are no benefits once it's in the ground. We don't recover the metals, etc. Whereas with forms of thermal treatment energy from waste, you do capture all the metals, you do recycle the bottom ash, you recover energy, roughly a third the value of coal. So it doesn't mean it's better than recycling or reuse or prevention. They're higher up the waste hierarchy, but aside from any future taxation, it would still be advantageous for the council to move away from landfill as its major means of treatment and disposal.
Any news yet on the other measures being brought in by central government regarding packaging or anything else? Nothing's been delayed in that field?
I missed what you said first. Is there any other measures being brought in by central government?
Well, We had targets, didn't we, about reducing responsibility coming in. Has it been delayed at all? Is it still due to come in at the dates that were given?
Again, so I think, sorry, we're bringing too many technical reports to the committee because I think it just shows how much legislative change is happening in waste. We did bring a report about extended producer responsibility, which is the packaging report that is in effect from this coming financial year 25-26. Government has made payments to all local authorities, that's districts and county councils, as part of the extended producer responsibility scheme. So the county council got just over £6 million to recognise the costs that we incur from industry in them putting packaging into the waste stream, and the districts got payments. I can't speak for what they got, but they did all receive payments, which is to try and affect a change in behaviour by the packaging industry so that we reduce the amount of packaging in the waste stream. So that has come into effect. We have also recently had guidance from government in the last week or two. We've had letters that show that the government is committed to food waste rollout from April 2026. And that includes some further information on what the districts will get in terms of payments. They've had capital information, but this was revenue. Again, not something that affects the county council because we don't get anything for food waste rollout under the new burden scheme. But yes, a number of measures are either happening in the next couple of weeks or with food waste from from 26-27.
And final question, Chair, is
Mr. Bolton, please.
Have you got somewhere to take the food waste when it's collected?
Yes. we do have contracts in place for the food waste once we have liaised with the districts on the exactness of how that scheme will come into effect. But yes, we do.
Thank you.
Joanna, is it a little secret or can you tell us where it goes?
It's not a secret. I just can't tell you the name of the contractor, but we've been in an arrangement with this contractor for food waste for a number of years, and that contract still has quite a number of years left on its tenureship. So we have contractual provision. I just can't remember the name of the contractor. I'm sorry. I can't find that.
No, it wasn't the name. That's just interested what they do with it, really.
Well, it's just it's a tried and tested. So you with food waste, unlike composting, you have to have a contained system. So in effect, it's classed as sort of like an in vessel. You put the material inside, it gets up to a critical temperature that kills off any and all of the pathogens that might be in that material, so that you then can process it beyond that. So it's just a contained system rather than an open air system, which is what you can use for just garden or green waste.
And then what do they do with it? I'm just interested. Sorry, sorry to keep a bit fascinated to know where it all goes. And
Bolter's Garden.
Is it actually? And there's recycling and there's upcycling and there's another type of cycling, repurposing. But I was just wondering where it went. Sorry, I don't. Please, I'm not putting you under pressure. Just personally, I'm interested in what they do with it when it's gone through all of those processes.
So, well, it becomes a product at the other end of that system. It depends on the system as to the exactness of what product you have at the other end of that process. But again, I also think on our forward plan, we potentially have something to bring to you about food waste. But yes, I mean, the products are a gas. So obviously you end up with a sort of biogas, and then you end up with sort of this digestate material. You're going to then ask me where that goes.
It's going to go on and on, this, isn't it? No, I'm not going to hold you to task for that. I'm just wondering if it's historically things like that used to go to pigs and pet products and all that.
I wouldn't commit to the committee exactly where the digestate that we have under contract goes, but I can always look into it for you, Chair.
Only out of interest, morbid curiosity, if you will. Colleagues, is there any further questions for our officers on this particular agenda item? Thank you. Well, I did promise some of you might be able to get the early bus home with the school kids. So I think we're about at the end there. Is that right? We're about finished? Thank you. Okay, so all that's left for me to say is that the date of the next meeting of this committee is scheduled to take place on the 11th of June 2025 at 2 p.m. Personally, I'd like to thank all the officers and the members who I believe have a collective interest in the sustainable of Leicestershire as our beautiful county. And thank you for letting me be part of your lives for a little while. I'd also like to wish this committee best wishes with future debates, developments and environmental improvements, and thank you for having me. It's my last one. And also thank you for attending today's meeting. And on that note, friends, I declare the meeting officially closed. Thank you.